You know, we were talking in here the other day about some of what is being discussed as the truth. And I'm talking from a personal standpoint, as a non-fiction writer. The truth obviously is very, very important in what I do. And I'm currently working on a book about the 1968 presidential election. And that was the election won by Richard Nixon over Hubert Humphrey. And all this kind of coalesced in my mind yesterday, which was the first of the year in 2017, January 1st, 2017, when the New York Times ran a piece about Richard Nixon and about the whole, what they call the Anna Chennault affair, where, to give this just as briefly as possible, Nixon had been contacted by Anna Chennault, who was the widow of the head of the Flying Tigers during World War II, a real war hero, Claire Chennault. She was, I believe, born in China. And she contacted Nixon because she had a plan for her to act as a go-between between Richard Nixon and Vietnam. The Vietnam War was still the issue of that election. Johnson had resigned or said he wasn't going to run because of the Vietnam War and his inability to end it. So we were talking, a couple of friends and I, about all this. Then it is in the newspaper, it just coincidentally. And what struck me about this, about the truth angle here, was she did act as a go-between, Nixon and the South Vietnamese government. And Nixon had told them if they held out, they being South Vietnam, from going to the Paris peace talks, he would cut them a better deal if he was elected. So they did. It hurt Humphrey a great deal. Nixon was elected, and the rest is sort of history. Well, this kind of came out over the years, what he had done. Some people call it actually treasonous, but it certainly wasn't legal what he did. He had broken the law. And now it's being presented in the New York Times on the 1st of January 2017 as if it was news. Well, I, for one, certainly had a lot of information about this and have written extensively about it in my book. And I'm not alone. I got this from a lot of different sources, including stuff in the Lyndon Johnson Library. And so it isn't news, but it's a very, very important, yet neglected part of that point in history. And what made me think about it as truth is that in those days, they didn't have what we have today, what I have to work with. When I did my first books, I would have to research them the old-fashioned way, go through miles and miles of archival materials on microfilm and microfiche. Now you sit at a computer and blop, there it is. It's right at your fingertips. And you have today all the different media, the social media, Twitter and such. And I was thinking about all this in context of what we're facing today. Donald Trump has yet to take the oath of office, but he's about to. And he has used Twitter to his advantage. Facebook accounts have been devoted to telling false news stories. And you start thinking about how history is formed through all of this. There's been talk how this is going to play out, no one knows, of the Russians hacking our computer systems to influence the election. And what do we have today? What is my job today when it comes to all of this? When Nixon was running for office, there was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. You wonder what it would mean if they'd had it back then. There was a lot of worry in the case of Hubert Humphrey about his not splitting from Johnson soon enough to save his political skin. And these are all things that I've found myself thinking about. And part of it is because I've always been very fascinated by people who mix truth, or nonfiction and fiction, where it becomes this sort of hybrid. And it's something I would like to do someday myself, certainly. But where, in Libra, for example, the great account of the Kennedy assassination and Oswald, participation in it by Don DeLillo, he used the basic historical facts and then mixed all sorts of material in it. Norman Mailer used fictional tools to tell the story of Gary Gilmore in The Executioner's Son, for which he won all sorts of major awards. And when you're in my position and you're writing nonfiction, you're so slave to what is, that works in your advantage sometimes. It works to your advantage in the respect that somebody can say, well, you can't say that, it doesn't make sense. I'm going, well, I certainly can say that because that's what happened. Whether it makes sense or not is beside the point. It happened. Whereas in fiction, it has to follow a certain pattern or it's not permissible. So nonfiction is good in that respect. But what do you do when the sources of your material may not be telling the truth? What do you do when the truth is so slow coming out as it was in the Chenault case? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know that it does gravely affect how I report and how I form the materials in my books. If I don't see something, I need corroboration more than ever. Before, if you had it from a reasonable source, you were good. Not anymore. You need to have corroboration because no one will believe you today. If Donald Trump, for example, says this is so, people believe that it's so, even if it's not true. And Trump is a notorious liar. And so it really has become something that at this late stage in the game for me as a writer, it's become a very, very serious issue that I have to consider if I intend to continue to write nonfiction. And it certainly has a lot to do with what I'm writing right now, because what I'm writing about are events that happened nearly 50 years ago. And there was a whole different way of reporting these events. But now you find out that some of it, was true, and some of it was maybe a little exaggerated, it was a little hyperbolic or whatever, that can affect my work directly. So this is a long-winded way of saying that truth today is as important as it's ever been, but it's not as easy to pin down as it once was.